Hello everybody, my name is Drake. I've become my sister's servant. And honestly, it's the most unpleasant thing that can happen to relatives. Watch and listen to how I got caught in the net and how it turned out for me. I have a sister named Reva. She's a couple of years older than me but crafty like 5 years. Reva just hated household chores, then our mom, she worked and always stressed. Do this, do that. You couldn't get any help from my dad. Even though he worked remotely from home. He still sat in his office all day and all night long. He wouldn't even come out of there, and his mother would call and ask him to feed him. Go feed your father. What? Mom called? Yeah, you go. I fed him yesterday. I can't. I'm on the phone with Kat. I'm doing my homework, Reva. Look, Drake, I've told you 100 times that talking to your friend is sacred. And if you don't want to lose your allowance, go. Reva, that's not fair. Fair? If you don't do it, I'll tell my mom. I'm sick of it. That's it, I'm going to my room. And it was like this almost every day. She took advantage of my labor. I ended up having to feed my father. Dad wouldn't even look up from the computer, he would just take food off his plate and eat it. Sometimes I thought if I slipped him a piece of wood instead of food, he would eat it too. Anyway, one day, I was sick of it all. I was mad at Reva, and I was mad at Mom, because she didn't care who was feeding Dad, and I was mad at Dad not being able to feed himself at 45. What am I, your housekeeper? I yelled to the whole house, but no one heard me. Then Mom came out of the room and said she and Dad were leaving on an urgent business trip to the office and asked Reva and me to clean up Dad's garage. Dad's garage? That garage is more my garage than his. Why? Because he puts the car in there and that's it, and I'm the one who takes care of it. I'm asking you and Reva, but she doesn't do anything. She makes me do nothing. And you don't want to solve it. You're adults, come to an agreement. It's not working out. Frankly, I'm glad you're doing it. Because you're the only one who's good at it. Son, Reva cleans badly and cooks even worse. What's that got to do with me? It had nothing to do with me. It just happened. We're off. Bye. One thing was clear. My problems are my problems and nobody else's. Sometimes I felt like I was just a foster kid who'd been hired just to clean up. That's why Reva was freaking out, and why I did. Well, at that point I was determined that I would do everything so that I wouldn't be asked to do anything later. I went into the garage and began not to put things in order, but on the contrary scattered everything, threw everything here and there, threw everything at random. And I accidentally hit a vase with the bag. It broke. And you know, it's not that this vase was somehow important to the parents, just that it was grandfather's ashes. My grandfather was peculiar, was into Buddhism, and before he died, he wanted to be cremated. Well, the ashes were then scattered over the sea. My mother took the vase to the garage in advance, so we did not forget it, because just this weekend we were going to go to the sea. We weren't going there just for my grandfather. My father had an important meeting. The vase for about a year stood in our hall, on the mantle, and recently my mother took it out and said that we should not forget it. So anyway, now my grandfather wasn't in the vase, but on the car, on the floor, on old boxes of stuff. I didn't know what to do out of fear. The only thing I wanted was for my mother not to find out. I quickly started picking up his ashes with a broom and shoving them back into another vase, along with the dust and dirt, then quickly cleaned up the garage and ran to the shower. When I came out of there, Reva was standing at the door. Oh. Scared me. Wash the kitchen floor. I'll do it myself, I won't do anything else. Right? And if I tell my mom what you did? What? Did you see everything? Of course, I did, you idiot. How could you do that? Where do your hands come from? Don't fucking tell her, please. So I won't tell her, go clean up. All right. I'll do it. It's your fault, you shouldn't have done that. Maybe she was right about something. I always cleaned up, but I should have done it today. I had no choice. I cleaned up, my parents came in. Reva came out to them with a mysterious smile and looked at me. Is something wrong? No, I mean, nothing. I cleaned up, everything is okay. Reva, what happened to your face? Is everything okay? Yes, we cleaned the kitchen. You cleaned too? Yes, she did, I cleaned the garage.
Well done. Thank you, children. At the weekend we're going to the sea, don't forget to pack a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to Kat's.
Maybe we'll have dinner at the cafe?
I have to go, I'll see you later.
What about you, Drake?
Aw, are you going to put the car in the garage?
No, we used Mom's, we'll use it. Why?
No, I was just asking. Your car is very dirty, we should take it to a car wash.
It's weird, I thought I washed it the other day.
Probably after your general cleaning? Yes, that's right. Okay, I'm going to get ready and go to the cafe. After dinner at the cafe, we came home and I went to bed. I felt terrible. I was tossing and turning all night, and I had nightmares. More specifically, I dreamt about my grandfather. As if he came into my bedroom, all dirty, sat on the bed and looked at me sadly. I got up and asked him what happened, and my grandfather told me, "Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You mixed my ashes with dirt. How can I rest in peace now, knowing that my grandson did this to me? I'm sorry, Grandpa, I didn't do it on purpose."
Couldn't you have cleaned up properly? Look at the state I'm in now.
I started sobbing, asking him to forgive me, and then I woke up abruptly. Grandfather was disappointed. I knew it was my fault. All the days that followed, Reva blackmailed me. I did all the work for her, and she threatened to tell my mother everything if I refused. I became her servant, washed dishes, cleaned, cooked, did laundry, even cleaned her room, and sometimes gave her my money. Just so she wouldn't say anything to my mother. But my conscience wouldn't leave me alone. The day came when we had to leave for the sea. We packed everything, and I looked in the trunk of my bag and saw that there was a neatly wrapped vase. I remembered my grandfather and even felt sick with excitement. We drove almost all day and finally arrived. The first thing we did was unload our stuff and then we went to the beach. Reva took her camera and asked me to take pictures of her every step. And I was so tired of her by that time. Plus I was thinking about my grandfather all the time and it was getting worse. I had bruises under my eyes, I lost my appetite and I didn't sleep a wink. I'm fed up with you. What am I? Your photographer? I do all your work for you. What's wrong with you? I can't do what you want. I'm like your servant. I'm sick of it. Alright, I'll go tell my mom about what you've done. Stop. She didn't listen to me. Her parents were carrying a bundle in their hands. Reva just opened her mouth to complain, but Mom asked her to talk about it later. Let's go. Now we have an important moment. Grandpa's last wish. Why? Already? Yes, while we're here, we should do it first thing. Mom, Dad, Drake has something to tell you. What? Are you crazy? Is it because I didn't want to take your picture? You're an idiot, you know that?
What? Son, you can't talk like that. Where are your manners?
What the hell kind of manners? You let her get away with everything. And I'm like a cleaner and a cook in the kitchen and the house all day long. And what does Reva do? All she does is talk on the phone and tell me to get undressed. Is that fair? What, Reva want to tell me? Go ahead, I can't be your servant anymore. If you ever noticed that I do everything by myself, you wouldn't treat me like one. I didn't want Grandpa's ashes mixed in with the dirt in our garage, but as it is, go ahead and yell. I'm such a defective son. What, ashes? What did you say, ashes? What do you mean?
What did you do with the ashes?
Oh, what did you? I thought Reva know about that. Okay, we need to talk. What did you do with Grandpa's ashes? I told it like it is. I cried for a long time and told about my dream, that my grandfather judged me and I was ashamed. Mom suddenly smiled and then showed me a completely different box. It had a lid and it was closed. What are they? Grandpa's ashes were in the vase you broke, but we put them in this box before the trip. And that vase must have had dust in it or something. So I didn't do anything to Grandpa?
No, you didn't, but we're having a separate conversation with Reva.
What about me? Hooray! I was so relieved. It was the best day of my life.
Hi, my name is Dan. I don't want to sound unassuming, but if you haven't met any guys who don't have a lot of nobility or something, well, I'm one of them. I'm joking, and I'm not joking. In short, listen to my story. I guarantee you will be intrigued. And yes, I will be happy if you write your opinion in the comments, as well as like my story. Anyway, at first we lived as a small family. Dad, Mom, Sister Abby, and me. We lived like everyone else. Abby and I went to school, and my parents worked. We did not often relax with the family. Recently, we used to like to skate and go to the movies together or just sit at home and watch something, discuss, play Monopoly, and then entertainment became less and less. Abby and I have already asked our parents to sit with us, but each time we heard some excuses, especially from my mother, and then it turned out that she wanted to leave us. Yes, it was a nightmare. We didn't even believe it at first, but when my mother packed her bags and said that she had another one, it was a huge blow for our father. I was even afraid that he would never come to his senses, but little by little, we began to cope. Several years have passed since that moment, and I still remember how my mother ran out of the house to the taxi that arrived and did not even turn around. Of course, I was so angry. Abby was more upset, and Dad was in shock. And so, as soon as we all came to our senses, Dad gave us a gift. Guess what? I already had a bad feeling that day. I knew something bad was going to happen. I'd missed the first class, which was an important test. The teacher was mad at me, sent me to retake, and Abby had fallen off her bike that day and hurt her leg. I rushed to the medicine cabinet, but there wasn't even a green card. My mood was already spoiled. In the evening, we were waiting for my father. He promised to bring us delicious food and a restaurant. In the end, we set the table and were already hungry and waiting for my father, when suddenly the door opened and a woman came in instead of my father. Dad followed her in with a bunch of bags in his hands, and there was food. We got up and said hello like well-behaved children, took the package, and started unloading them. The lady said we were really cute and ran to wash our hands and then started helping us. We looked at her questioningly, but it wasn't proper to ask her out loud in front of a guest, so we just didn't say anything. It was just before dinner started that the father said the woman's name was Miss Tiara, but she interrupted him and told us to just call her Tiara. We also introduced ourselves and started eating. Judging by the dinner, and the way father carefully tended to her, it was obvious that they were dating, and not so long ago. When dinner was over, Abby and I went to our rooms. Before going to bed, Abby said she didn't like Miss Tiara, but I asked her to wait for her conclusions. After all, our dad is lonely, and it's normal for him to start a relationship all these years later. Our mother probably has her own family for a long time. Abby lowered her head and lay down on the bed. I made her promise not to tell my dad her opinion yet, at least until he officially made a statement. She agreed. Tiara had come to our house several times in the past week, and Abby still hadn't kept her promise. Tiara, she said to her as Miss picked up a glass of juice and sipped it slowly, "Are you sleeping with my father?" At that moment, Mrs. nose was full of juice. My father was choking on the meat, and I was all smiles. Father scolded her for asking such a direct question, but Tiara stopped him. She told Abby that she and Dad are dating and she really hopes to be friends with us. My sister said that our family doesn't need such friends. "We're fine without you," she said. Dad scolded her again, and I excused myself, took her hand, and led her into the room. I talked to her, asked her not to do it again, and asked her to give my father a chance. After dinner, of course, we both had a lecture from my father. I asked him if he intended to marry her, to which my father did not answer clearly. Abby said she didn't like the tiara, but Dad asked her not to be jealous and to give her time to prove herself. Then he went to his room. At night of the same day, my father received a call from work and was told to go on a business trip urgently. This didn't happen before, so we were very confused. I didn't know what to do with Abby, even though she was already going to school, but she still seemed like a child to me. Dad immediately called Tiara and asked her to come. Yes, she agreed to look after us for a couple of days in his absence. It was polite of her, but Abby was hysterical. We quickly saw my father off and went to bed. Abby came to my room to talk. She said she didn't trust the woman, and I explained that she was just jealous of father, but that sooner or later he would get married. At that time, we had no idea what was waiting for us. Abby and I stayed up late that night. I passed out, and my sister couldn't sleep, so she went out for a drink of water. She woke me up in the middle of the night, and I didn't even know what was going on. Abby was frantic about Tiara going through Dad's things, but I didn't think it was strange. Let her dig. In the morning, we woke up to the gorgeous smell of pancakes. It turned out that Tiara made us breakfast, which was nice, and I thanked her for it, but Abby didn't even touch it. Then Tiara said that she wanted to make friends with us, so she came up with some games for us, and walks in the park. I thought it was a good idea, and Abby didn't say anything, but I dressed her and we went to the park. After walking for a couple of hours, we got hungry and returned home. While I was changing, Abby noticed something strange in the house, and she said that Tiara had found Dad's vault and was trying to break into it. and I didn't like it anymore. I went into my father's room, and Tiara quickly jumped out of there. "Oh, I thought you were asleep. Don't you sleep during the day?" She laughed nervously. Abby called her a thief and chased her out of the house. I asked her to leave politely and watched her go with a very unkind look. We called my father and asked him to come. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Wow, is Dad that fast? I opened the door, and there were police officers and a tear-stained Tiara. The uniformed man said they needed to talk to their father, but when they found out he wasn't there, he wanted to take Abby to the station. To my questions, he said that she was suspected of stealing someone else's ring. Her, the policeman said, pointed at the tiara. "What?" I asked. "Yes, this is a mistake. It can't be. We see it for the first time in our lives," I shouted, but everything turned out to be useless. Tiara ran into our house and started turning everything over, and then opened the safe and pulled out her ring. Can you imagine my face? Abby started crying. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. And then he said I did it. I took all the blame. They took me to the station, and I told Abby to wait for Father. After a few hours of waiting, my father arrived. He didn't know how to react, and the tearful Tiara rushed to his shoulder to cry. I didn't say anything. I knew he wouldn't believe me. He didn't take anything Abby said, because we're the only ones who know the code to the safe. And just when I thought I was really going to jail, Abby suddenly dragged my father home. She asked him to trust her, but I didn't know what she was up to. It turns out that our little smart girl remembered about the video cameras in our house. Dad looked at the records and saw everything for himself, then saved them and gave them to the police. I was released, and Tiara was put in my place. It turned out that she wanted to get rid of us, his children, so that we wouldn't get in her way. She only wanted to arrange their personal life, but we were superfluous there. It's a good thing we installed cameras a long time ago. My father was in shock, and for a long time asked us for forgiveness. Did you like our story? Then put likes, comment, and be sure to subscribe to the channel, friends.
Hi everyone, my name is Eric. I'm going to share with you a story about a bullshit relationship with a teacher. I think many of you have a similar story, but only I didn't know the reason for her slanted looks at first. And look what I did when I found out. I came to this school relatively recently. My parents and I used to live elsewhere, but then we bought a place in another state for various reasons. It didn't work out for me with school placement, but there were only 2 schools in the new place. They wanted to put me in a less strict school because my mom said that I had grown up to be a good boy, like I didn't need the pressure. But as it turned out, that's what a lot of other parents thought. That's why that school was full. No vacancies. They told us and closed the door in our faces. My mother sighed. There was nothing to do. With a stack of papers, we went to another school with a high fence. There was a sign at the main entrance that said, "No trespassers allowed," which was already scary. I was waiting for a vicious dog to fly out at us, and for good reason. The principal came out. She was like making a house-to-house sweep during school hours. Their dialogue with Mom was brief. "Hello, we would like to get a job at your school. Is the child a problem child? No, what makes you think of that? We don't bring others in. No, my son is a good boy. We just moved here and the bad school is busy. Everyone says so, but they come to us. Documents? Here you go. Accepted. Go ahead, classes end at 2:30. How? Already now? But we're not ready yet. We don't even have textbooks. We'll give them to you. Go. Discipline is paramount." Mom was so scared, she squatted down and kissed me. "Son, I'll come for you, okay? Don't worry, they'll give you everything and show you everything. I love you. I love you too. Get your shenanigans out of your system at home. This is school, and you're a stranger." Mom hurried to leave, and I got a little uncomfortable. I was escorted to my class. There weren't many kids, and everyone was sitting there writing and reading something, and there was just dead silence. The teacher looked at me, the principal said briefly, "You're new?" and pushed me inside. I said, "Hi," and was immediately directed to a seat at the back of the desk. I sat down silently. The teacher gave me a notebook and a pen. Then she told me to introduce myself. I got up from my desk. "Eric Cooper, arrived from Nevada 2 days ago. My name is Alice Belden. Call me Miss Belden." "Okay, ma'am." And she went on with her lesson. I looked around a bit, looking at my new classmates with interest. My park neighbor wrote "Ted" in the margins of his notebook. I smiled a little back at him, like, nice to meet you too. He pointed his finger at me like shish, but then Miss Belden came up to me. She grabbed my ear with her gloved hands and said loudly, "We have unacceptable bad behavior. Behave like this at home in your own house, but not within the walls of this school. Is that clear to you?" "Yeah, clear, ma'am. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." She let me go, and I sat back down. Her gloves rubbed my ears. None of the guys even laughed. It was like everyone was scared. I had a feeling this was going to be a long lesson. When it was over, we walked out of the classroom and Ted finally said,
You're new here, but you'll get used to it. She's not just our history teacher, she's our guidance counselor. So unless you want to get kicked out of school and forget about your dream of going to college, then follow the rules.
"Is everyone here so strict?"
No, the others are even worse.
"What, is it a concentration camp? Or a school?"
Think of it as both.
"And how did you end up here?"
Like everyone else, by pure chance.
Ted smiled. I couldn't believe that these guys would have any notoriety or behavioral problems, much less legal problems. No one was running around in the halls, everyone behaved perfectly, studied, and didn't skip classes. My mom read on the internet that the teachers and students have a 100% attendance rate. It's the only school like that, but there are also a lot of expelled students. At that moment I could only hope that I was not on the list of the worst. In the evening at home, Mom and Dad asked me questions about my day. I told them that it wasn't very wordy. "Did you tell anyone about yourself? About being adopted?" "Yeah." "No, I wasn't really into that. But I found out that a lot of kids there are from orphanages. But I never thought they had a dark past."
Everyone has their skeletons in the closet, and that's why our past doesn't define us. Right.
Right. I loved my adoptive parents. They adopted me when I was a kid. They told me at boarding school that I was dropped off, and only one photo from the past was of me, where a young woman was holding me in her arms. Her face is hard to see, but I noticed that she was missing a pinky finger on her right hand. I always wondered what was wrong with her, where she was, and why she did that. But I had no regrets because I had good parents and a life of plenty. I was raised like one of my own. On the second day when I came to school, the principal asked me to come in. Miss Bildon, the teacher, was sitting in the study. "I've studied your credentials. Are you an intern?" "Yes, ma'am." "What is your real name?" "Gerald." "It's prettier. How long have you been adopted?" "I don't remember, I guess so." "Do you know where your mother is?" "No, I only have a picture of her. I don't remember her and don't know her." The director asked for the photo. I always had it with me. I handed it to her. Suddenly they both changed their faces and looked at each other, and Bildon sat down in a chair. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. It's a routine interview. We do it with every kid. You can go." I took the picture and went back to class. Later the teacher came in. She was crumpling her gloves. "Ted, why is she always wearing gloves?"
I don't know, she's always wearing them. They say she has some kind of disease.
Bildon heard me discussing her and called me to the board. She made me kneel for the entire class while reading passages from world history. I was tired, wanted to go to the bathroom, and my legs were stiff. But every time I tried to get up, she pulled my ears away with her gloves. And this went on for 5 days. I knew I couldn't take it anymore, so I complained to my mom. She came to school angry and went into the principal's office screaming. I stood beside her and could hardly hold back my tears. I was offended by myself. "I do not understand what I did wrong. You were whispering about your teacher. It's unacceptable, and that's why you made him kneel for 6 days straight and pull his ears back? That's the way it works. Look at the performance of the school. It's not a school, it's a concentration camp. We don't need your evaluation. Get out of here." The teacher put out her gloved hand and pointed her finger at the door. My mother reacted like a bull to a red rag. She ripped off her glove and smacked Bildon in the face with it. I froze. Everyone was in shock and only my mom was breathing hard. "Mom? She's my mom." I pointed with shaking hands at her hand, and Mom pulled a picture out of my bag and compared faces. "So that's why you're so mad at him? You dumped him, and now you're humiliating him?" "I didn't dump him. I didn't. It wasn't my fault." Shouting, yelling, I clamped my red ears with my hands and sat down on the floor. I wanted to roar. After a minute, security came running in. My mother took me home. She barely calmed me down. Dad told us to pack our things because we were moving. Mom started packing, and I sat on the couch and could not come to my senses. An hour later, someone rang the doorbell. We opened the door, and there was Bildon, and she was crying, and her makeup was smeared. "Can I come in?" Mom didn't want to let her in, but I asked her to. She sat across the hall and was silent. Dad poured her some water. "What are you here for? I need to talk to Gerald. His name is Eric."
Easy, honey, let her talk.
The teacher looked at me, and the first thing she said was, "You've gotten so grown up. And handsome. Forgive me. If I hadn't listened to my mother, I never would have you here. I never would have left you." What happened? I was young. I fell in love and got pregnant. My boyfriend left me. My mom was working in prison at the time. She was a warden. That explains a lot. Bildon. For getting me pregnant, she broke my finger. I had to have it amputated after a while so I wouldn't have to take medicine because I was carrying you. And then she told me to give you away as it was not acceptable. There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't regret it. Gerald, I'm so sorry. A few years later, she left prison and got a job at the school. Year after year, she got promoted, and she made the school into a real concentration camp for troubled kids. I took a job with her, hoping I'd meet you. I didn't think you'd grow up to be different from the rest of the boarding school. She kept crying and talking. I listened to her carefully, and then I went over and told her that I wasn't mad at her. But Mom and Dad decided to leave, so it's been 2 months since then. We got a new house, I got a new school. I never saw Bildon again.
Hello, everyone. My name is Esther. I have a few questions for you. Who is your idol? Who are you proud of? For many of us, of course, the idols are our parents. So were mine. Until I found out a terrible secret about them. I still can't believe they would do such a thing. I was always proud of my parents. It would seem that I had never met such worthy, wise people. I saw in them a constant kindness, and I wanted to be the same. I always tried to do my best at school, behave properly, copy my dad's manners, and think like my mom. I wanted to become the same as my parents in the future, but sometimes we make mistakes. We only see the surface. The more I learned about them, the more I lost respect for them. I was in the 8th grade. As a class, we decided to collect things for the children who had been abandoned by their parents in orphanages. I was taught from childhood to be kind, and I without doubt bought a lot of new things and collected all my childhood toys and books. We decided to not go to an ordinary orphanage, but to the children with disabilities. Over dinner, I told my parents that I was going to the orphanage tomorrow. I've always felt sorry for orphan children, not exactly disabled ones. I believe that childhood is a period when the personality is laid, the worldview is formed, vitality, purposefulness. These qualities do not develop spontaneously, but are formed with full-fledged parental love. I believe that these children not only suffered psychological and physical trauma at birth, but they also have to survive and cope alone. We never discussed this with our parents, and I shared the news with them over dinner. I remember that my father got up and went to his room, and my mother's eyes started to water. I never understood what happened then. The next morning, I decided to apologize and said that I was proud of my parents, and I was sure that they would never do that. We went with a class to an orphanage. I was glad that I had good-natured classmates. We collected a lot of toys, food, and clothing. We planned to stay until the evening, because we had prepared a performance for them. First, the children greeted us, prepared dances, songs, scenes of famous fairy tales. It was very fun. They are so talented. Then we showed our performance, and then there was interaction. No one was bored. The final conclusion was their performances with life stories. Everyone had their own story. One was left by their parents in their home, the other after 3 years of trying to overcome a disease. The other's parents took away their parental rights, and there were a lot of such stories. Every story made me cry. These life stories affected me very much, and different feelings arose. Feelings of guilt, ingratitude, and resentment. The last speaker was a girl who reminded me very much of my mother in childhood, which I saw in a photo. I don't know why, but at that moment I was very affected by her appearance, and the story made me ask her questions. Her name is Sarah, older than me by 4 years. She was predicted to have cerebral palsy. She was injured during childbirth. I do not know whose fault it was, but at that moment for me, it was her parents who just left her to fend for herself. According to the story, her parents did not immediately abandon her. They left her to her grandmother, but her grandmother died and, at the age of 3, she had to be sent to an orphanage. She remembers them. They visited at first. She told me how she and her grandmother loved each other, remembered her love and warmth, but from others, she never felt anything, unless it caused a feeling of constant pity. In the end, she said that she hopes and believes that her parents will come for her. Maybe they are having difficulties now, and she understands everything. Her grandmother gave her a picture of her parents before she died, and she keeps it by her heart. I really wanted to see it, and even more, I wanted to talk to her, as if I had found a soulmate in her. But the time had come to distribute the collected things and go home, and so I didn't have time. I arrived home very depressed, without mood. My soul was empty. I didn't sleep all night. The stories of all the orphans' lives affected me very much. I especially couldn't forget this girl, who was left by her parents after her grandmother's death. After waiting for dawn, I ran back to the orphanage. I needed to talk to her, to calm down. I wanted to be her friend and help her in any way I could. When I arrived, they had finished breakfast. The teachers recognized me and gave me a chance to talk to her alone. I don't know how many hours we talked. The words didn't end, and I saw myself in her more and more, and she recognized herself in me. It was as if we had known each other since birth. We started telling our secrets, and there was complete trust. I told her about my parents and how proud I was of them. After that, I asked to see a picture of her parents, because she said it was the only thing that remained of them. She kept the photo in her diary, where she wrote letters to her parents every day. I was shocked by what I saw, because they were my parents. My hands started to shake, and the photo was on the floor in a split second. Now images of my grandmother taking care of her played through my mind, and I began to understand why my parents had reacted so strangely, why she had affected me. I was too shocked to say a single word. I went home in silence and in a terrible state. I hoped that my parents would calm me down and say that there was a misunderstanding, that she's not my sister, and the picture isn't of my parents. On the way home, I wrote that we were going to have a serious conversation and asked them to get ready. Mom was home, and Dad had to leave work early. I remember that day very well, the tension in the room. Unfortunately, as much as I don't want to think bad things about my parents, Sarah was my own sister. My mother did not manage to share much with me, but my father told me how hard it was for them to accept such a burden. They were afraid, and are still afraid. I found out that they often visited the orphanage where Sarah is located and sponsored, but Sarah didn't know about it. My parents would have told me sooner or later, because you can't hide a secret like that. I admitted that I was disappointed in them, felt lonely, and in my heart doubted their love. I got depressed and didn't talk to them for a week. I was looking for a solution. I had 2 conditions. Either I go to an orphanage until I come of age, or Sarah will live with us and we will give her a full life. One day, my parents called me and offered to pick up Sarah themselves, and we had a long conversation. They repented, saying that this was the biggest mistake that they had made in their lives. Since then, Sarah and I are the closest sisters. I love her with all my heart. My parents and Sarah also quickly found a common language. I am glad that my parents corrected their mistake, because the child is not to blame for anything. Blame for anything. Blame for anything.